Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at recording and editing narration or voiceover for an audio for video session. Ironically, that's what I'm doing right now. There are several ways we put narration into a session. The most common way is with a script with timecode numbers next to each paragraph. Here is an example. The show started at 1 hour, so the timecode would have 1 hour added to these times. As you can see, 1 second, 38 seconds, 43 seconds, 52 seconds, and so on. This is actually a 1 hour show. With this script, we recorded the VO while running the picture, but most times the voice is recorded wild, meaning we are not recording the picture. Then using the timecode notes on the script, the narration is edited and placed to the video. Generally, there are multiple takes of each line, and the producer or engineer will star the select takes. You may have to run a stopwatch if the timings are exact. Often the narration will be recorded at another studio. In that case, thanks to high-speed internet and FTP, we can get the audio very quickly. Okay, we don't need to look at my track anymore. Let's look at the real voiceover track. In this session, the narrator read the script while watching the video. In a way, this is similar to recording a singer in a vocal session. We record the voice on the fly while running the show and then go back and punch in when needed. This can be fun but tricky because if you end up with only one take of each line, you have to be really certain that everyone is happy with the takes and that all the words are correct. Let's look at the QuickTime. The narrator has a video monitor. He can see the timecode numbers on the screen and follows along with the script. This is a lot harder than it sounds.
Rolex presents a new concept in sailing. 200 amateur sailors will soon arrive in Newport, Rhode Island, New England's sailing capital, from Europe and Asia, North America and down under. Amateur sailors will compete in a series of races.
You can see at the top right of the screen the timecode numbers. That's called window burn or burn-in. More on that later. The way you record the VO will depend on your rig. We are recording with a Neumann U87 to a Focusrite preamp, to the Digi O2 rack, and using a Command 8 control surface. Since there is no actual audio mixer, we control the mic input levels from the preamp and the O2 rack. And since we are recording on the fly, we are bringing in the mic input directly to the record track with low latency. This way we can play the track back, hear it, and punch in. We also have an aux setup for the mic input as well. If you are recording the VO wild, as mentioned before, you can use the mic aux as a handy input fader. You monitor from the mic aux while recording and then switch to the record track or edit track for playback. Now let's look at the imported VO track. These are the raw takes. They will need to be cleaned up or de-breathed. To some degree, this is a subjective process. Some producers want all the breaths out. Some like to leave most in. I say whatever feels right. Generally, breaths at the beginning of sentences should come out. And then you get some real breathers, and it's pretty obvious what needs to be done. Some lines just won't sound right without the breath. At the Discovery Channel, we pretty much de-breath everything. Personally, if it was Norah Jones and she was singing, I'd sure leave the breaths in. But I like my narration tracks clean. Pro Tools has a nice feature called strip silence, which I sometimes use to get a head start on de-breathing. Particularly in a session like this, where the narrator is reading live and there are long stretches of spaces between lines. We will still need to go in and manually de-breath. We're not going to do a tutorial on strip silence. If you have any questions, please refer to page 732 in the Pro Tools reference guide. Basically, we are removing unwanted audio. The threshold will determine the volume where we begin to remove. You can see we are cutting into the audio there. So using region start and end pad, we can loosen the in and out edits to accommodate the audio. But strip silence doesn't totally do the job. I use this really as an initial cleanup. If you try to take breaths out with strip silence, you will find many rough edges in the audio. Now we can go through and finish cleaning up the VO track. First, we'll expand the waveforms so we can better see the breaths and listen to some narration.
From Europe and Asia, North America and down under, amateur sailors will compete in a series of races promoting sportsmanship and goodwill with the goal of building a bridge between sailors from around the world.
So you hear a few small breaths and one big one. We'll just remove all of them. Starting at the first voice clip, we'll just look at each breath and using our zoom presets, zoom out and go to the next. Remove the breaths and any other unwanted sounds. Depending on the narrator, the length or type of show, this can take a while.
Goodwill with the goal of
You always want to check the beginning and end of any clip that is cut to make sure it doesn't click in or out. Another gotcha. Most times a fade will take care of that. So here is our deep breath track.
Rolex presents a new concept in sailing. 200 amateur sailors will soon arrive in Newport, Rhode Island, New England's sailing capital, from Europe and Asia, North America and down under. Amateur sailors will compete in a series of races promoting sportsmanship and goodwill with the goal of building a bridge between sailors from around the world.
It sounds pretty bare, but you have to remember there's going to be music and sound design here as well. After bringing in an OMF or imported audio for a session, I always attend to the VO track first, because most times all of the other mix elements will be relative to the VO. So after cleaning the VO up, we should set a good level with EQ and compression that will be pretty close to the final mix. First, we'll pull up the Waves PAS meter from the monitor aux track. Again, here is our minus 20K tone. When we play the VO track, you'll see that we are peaking above -6, so we will want to lower the level of the VO, so that we peak between -6 and -12.
Newport, Rhode Island, New England sailing capital, from Europe and Asia, North America and down under.
Okay, now you see that we are hammering the bomb factory meter, so you will want to adjust the output setting. If you switch to RMS, the bomb factory will match the PAS. If you're coming from a music background like me, these levels look very low. It's been ingrained in us to make our mixes as hot as possible, but in audio for video, this is the standard. We'll get more into mix levels and quality control in a later chapter. Most of the time I use Waves plugins for processing, but have set up parallel processors with the standard DigiDesign plugins as well. Here is the Q10. As I'm sure you all know, there is no real formula for EQing voices. But what I generally do for narration is roll off a little around 60 Hz, and then find that spot on the high mids that gives the voice more clarity. That frequency will obviously change depending on the voice. Sometimes I'll add some on the high end as well, but if so, very little. If you have a good narrator, a good mic, and a good preamp, you shouldn't need a lot of EQ. You will see that we have the same relative settings on the Digi 7-band EQ. Then for compression, I really like the Waves Renaissance compressor. We start with the Voiceover preset and adjust the threshold so that we have about -3 dB of compression. This is generally what I would do for a television show. You may find that more compression works against a loud background. I have always felt that if you hear the compressor, then you have too much compression, unless you're purposely going for a heavily compressed sound. Now let's look at the Bomb Factory 76, and remember our old URI 1176s fondly. For VO, we have the attack set to 1, release 7, and the ratio is 4:1. And you will see we have around -3 dB of compression here as well.
200 amateur sailors will soon arrive in Newport, Rhode Island, New England sailing capital.
And those are some general compressor settings for the VO. Last, we have the Waves Renaissance de-esser. It's set to male DS split with just the slightest bit of de-essing. Of course, this can be adjusted too if your track is more sibilant. This is really used as a sibilant safety net. The DigiDesign de-esser also has a male DS preset as well, but you will need to adjust it so it barely catches the S's.
200 amateur sailors will soon arrive in Newport, Rhode Island.
Now, with either the Waves or DigiDesign plugins, the VO track should be ready to go in the mix. Please remember, this is not a voiceover tutorial. If it was, we would need to talk about radio and the many other aspects of voiceover recording. Maybe we will do that down the road. The goal here is to get you familiar with how a VO is used in an audio for video session. We imported the VO track, placed it in the session, debreathed, and prepared it to be mixed. This is Victor Giordano. Thanks for watching.